2001 through 2007 Dodge Caravan, Chrysler Town Country with a 3.3 liter engine alternator replacement. I'm Brian Eslick from How to Automotive. I'm going to walk you through the steps of replacing the alternator. The first step is going to be to disconnect the negative battery cable. After disconnecting the negative battery cable, we're going to come over here to the alternator and we're going to remove the electrical connector. So there's going to be a 13 millimeter nut holding the electrical connector on. So we're going to take that nut off and pull the cable off. Once you remove the 13 millimeter nut, you can just pull the cable off like this. And what you're going to do is just tuck it to the side and kind of out of your way like this. Now that we got the cable off, we're going to unplug the electrical connector that's just below here. And if you look at this EGR valve here and it has this little red tab, well, the connector down here is going to have the same type of red tab. It's a lock tab. So what we need to do is pry that tab over to the side. And once you get it pried over, then you can push the little tab and then pull the connector off. And one of the easiest ways to get to that connector is to use a pick tool like this. So what you're going to do is you're going to kind of reach underneath like this and hook it and then pull it out towards the radiator. And then once you get that pulled out, it only pulls out a little tiny tab. It doesn't come all the way out or anything, it just barely moves. So if you look at this EGR valve here, I'll demonstrate on it. So it's pushed in here, that's locked, and then what we're going to do is pull with the pick, pull it out like that. That's the unlocked position. Then you can squeeze that tab and pull it off. So that's what it's going to look like underneath. So you're going to pull that little red tab out. I'm just going to use this little pick tool, pull it out, and then once you get it pulled out, then you squeeze the little tab and pull it off. Also, another tip is to push it in towards the alternator and then squeeze the tab and then pull it off like this. So our next step is going to be to remove the drive belt. So here at the shop, I'm just going to lift the vehicle up and go from underneath. If you're doing this at home, use floor jacks and jack stands and get the front of the vehicle up, and you need to remove the right front wheel. Okay, here in the wheel well, we need to remove this cover here, and it's usually just held on with these little plastic push pin clips. This particular one's been removed before, so they've been changed, but you're going to follow them around and pop the little clips out and then pull this shield down. And once you get the shield down, now you have access to the tensioner. So it requires a serpentine belt tool, and this is what the serpentine belt tool looks like. Mine is made by Gear Wrench. It comes with an assortment of fittings to accommodate multiple cars that you may be working on. I'll link this up in the description of the video. The investment to own one of these is not very much, so they're worth having in your collection. So I have the tool set up with a 1/2-inch drive adapter, and what we're going to do is we're going to rotate this counterclockwise, and that'll spring the tensioner. And then once you rotate it counterclockwise, you can slip the belt off. I'm going to slip it off right here at the AC compressor. Okay, now that you got the belt off, I just let it hang over out of my way. And just above the AC compressor here is the bottom bolt for the alternator. So you can go ahead and remove that 15 millimeter bolt right here. So I'm going to use a 15 millimeter deep socket and just a standard ratchet and crack the bolt free. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over and use my Milwaukee M12 cordless 3/8 drive ratchet here. This makes jobs like this a lot quicker and easier. Once you get this bolt removed, now we're going to remove the bolt right here above it. You can either do it from here, or I'm going to lower the vehicle back down and get to it from the top. It's a little easier. To get to that bolt, I'm going to use my favorite wrench set in my toolbox, my collection here. And it's a combination ratcheting wrench. It's made by Mountain. It's about 18 inches long, and it's great for getting into these tight areas right here. And because of the length, you can get a tremendous amount of torque on it. So I'm going to use this little 15 millimeter ratcheting wrench here and crack this bolt free and spin it out. So I'll leave a link for this wrench in the description of the video. This is one of those tools that'll make your life easier, so I recommend you checking them out. Now this alternator has one more bolt that we need to get to, and it's going to be pretty far down here at the bottom of the alternator right here, and I'm going to use my combination ratcheting wrench once again to get to that bolt. So I'll crack that 15 millimeter bolt free. So once we get this bolt removed, the alternator is not going to quite come out without removing the EGR. On this vehicle it has an EGR. If yours doesn't have an EGR valve, then you should be able to lift your alternator straight out. But because the EGR is in the way, I'm just going to unplug the electrical connector And then I'm going to remove the two 8mm bolts here. And to do that, I'm going to use my Milwaukee M12 ratchet again to make quick work of that. I'll leave a link for this ratchet in the description of the video also. That way, if you're interested in picking this up, you can find that there. Next, I switched over to a 10mm deep socket and a little 1-inch extension. And then there's two bolts down here we're going to remove. So there's the top bolt here, you crack it free and spin it out. And then there's one more bolt just a little bit lower on the EGR valve here. So remove the two bolts and then the EGR valve will come off. When you take the EGR valve off, there's going to be two gaskets that you need to catch and don't let them fall down into the engine bay. These gaskets can be reused unless you damage them. If you damage them, you'll have to pick up new gaskets. Now there's plenty of room to lift the alternator straight up and out of the car. So this car requires a 140 amp alternator. Some models require a 160 amp alternator. There's a little sticker on the old alternator that should tell you how many amps the alternator has. I'll leave a link in the description of the video for both the 140 and the 160 amp alternator. That way if you need to pick either one of those up, you can find those in the description. So now we're going to take our alternator and lower it down into position and restart all three of the bolts. All three of the bolts are the same exact length, so you don't have to worry about mixing any of them up. So what I do is I start every one of the bolts by hand. So I'll start each one a few threads before I start tightening any of the bolts down. Once all three bolts are started, then I tighten the top bolt, and then I'll tighten the bolt down here, and then last I'll tighten the bolt from underneath. Now I'm going to reinstall the EGR valve. So I'm going to slip the gasket on over the bolts like this, and then position the EGR valve back into place. Then I'll start the two 10mm bolts that come from the side, and then what I'll do is I'll run the EGR valve up and tighten it up and then what you do is you line up the EGR pipe here and you slide the gasket underneath, and then you put the two bolts through the top in, and then you go ahead and tighten those two down. All these bolts are just tightened down till they're snug and maybe a quarter turn more. They don't have to be extremely tight. Now you can plug your EGR back in and then push the little lock tab. Then you can plug the electrical connector in for the alternator and push the lock tab on, and then also put the main power battery feed over the terminal and start the 13mm nut that held that on, and you're going to tighten that down until it's snug. Now we're ready to slip the belt back over the alternator. Make sure it's routed under the pulleys here, and then you're just going to torque the serpentine belt tensioner over like this and slip the belt back on over the AC compressor. Then we can go ahead and put the shield back up and push the push pin clips that held it in back into position. Once that's done, you can put the tire back on and lower the vehicle back down, and then we can reconnect your negative battery cable, and that'll complete the job of replacing the alternator on a 2001 through 2007 Dodge Caravan / Chrysler Town Country with the 3.3 liter engine. I'm Brian Eslick from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos, encourage you to subscribe, invite you to head over to the howtoautomotive.com website for more valuable videos like this, and also to remind you that I will link up all the parts and tools in the description of the video. Thank you again for watching.